$60 billion. That is the figure that shook the red soil of Burkina Faso and echoed far beyond its borders. In a world where small nations are often spoken of only in whispers, this number thundered like a storm. More gold than any child could imagine. More wealth than any farmer has ever seen in his lifetime. But history reminds us that gold has not always been a gift. In Africa, it has often been the seed of wars, the currency of betrayal, the mirror that reflects scars instead of riches. Today, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stands at a crossroads. Before him lies a choice written not in ink, but in dust and blood. Will this discovery mark the birth of dignity, or will it repeat the curse that consumed Congo, Niger, and Angola? The cameras have flashed, the promises have been spoken, but beneath the applause rises a question larger than numbers. Can one small landlocked nation rewrite its fate, or will the same hands that once chained Africa reach for its veins again? Stay with us. This is not just about gold. It is about destiny. Subscribe and walk with us through this turning point. The morning sun rose over Ouagadougou with the same heat it had carried for centuries. But this day was different. The weight of history pressed into the air as journalists crowded the government press hall. Cameras clicked, pens scratched, and then the words came. After months of geological surveys, the government of Burkina Faso announced that beneath the soil of Kaya, Gawa, and Bolsa lay more than 1,200 tons of pure gold, valued at over $60 billion. The Minister of Energy stood before the nation, his hands firm on the podium. His voice carried the gravity of generations. For the first time in our history, he declared, we will not dig riches to fill foreign banks. This gold will serve the barefoot child in Dori, the farmer in Banfora, the mother in Bobo Dioulasso. Applause erupted inside the hall, a thunder of hope. But outside, on the crowded streets of Ouagadougou, the reaction was quieter, shaded with suspicion. In Kaya, a young man leaned against a rusted motorbike, listening to the news on his phone. 60 billion, he muttered, half in awe, half in doubt. His friend shook his head, eyes tired from years of broken promises. We heard the same when they found oil in Niger, when they spoke of uranium in Arlit. Tell me, brother, what changed for the people there? Their conversation drifted like the Sahel wind, heavy with both possibility and disbelief. Captain Ibrahim Traoré gathered his ministers behind closed doors. The survey report lay open on the table, its numbers heavy as stone. He tapped the document with his finger, his tone sharp. This is not a blessing if we repeat the mistakes of the past. We must write a new story. Do you hear me? A new story. The room fell silent, the ministers nodding. But in their eyes flickered memories of other nations that had once spoken of new beginnings, only to see their wealth vanish across oceans. Gold had always been a paradox in Africa. To some, it was the seed of prosperity. To others, it was the seed of betrayal. In Burkina Faso, the discovery was painted as a seed planted in red soil. But a seed could grow into a harvest, or it could be consumed by weeds before it ever reached the sun. Which would it be this time? International headlines did not wait. The Financial Times hailed Burkina Faso as the new gold frontier of Africa. Reuters reported that mining giants were already seeking exploration licenses. Bloomberg analysts speculated that the nation's GDP could multiply tenfold if the reserves were managed properly. Yet behind the glowing numbers lurked a darker truth. Wealth had rarely stayed where it was found. From Congo to Angola, resources had too often flowed outward, leaving behind poverty, conflict, and poisoned rivers. Elders in Bolsa gathered beneath a neem tree, their voices low. One man spoke bitterly. They say this is our treasure, but whose trucks will carry it away? Whose banks will it enrich? Another replied, gold does not glitter the same for the poor. It blinds them. Silence followed, heavy and unresolved. That evening, Traoré appeared on national television. His face was resolute, framed by the flag of Burkina Faso. This discovery, he said, is the inheritance of every Burkinabe, not a prize for foreign corporations, not a gift to bankers in Paris or Toronto. We will decide how it is used, and the people will be the first to benefit. Cheers erupted across living rooms, cafes, and dusty courtyards. Yet beneath the excitement lay an uneasy question, whispered in homes and marketplaces alike. Could even the strongest leader hold back the tide of foreign powers once the rush began? For in the Sahel, history was not an abstraction. It was a scar. Villagers remembered uranium leaving Niger while their children studied by candlelight. They remembered diamonds flowing from Angola while families drank from polluted streams. They remembered Congo's vast minerals enriching the world while its people buried their dead. Now Burkina Faso stood before the same mirror, and the mirror reflected not only gold, but also shadows. $60 billion, enough to transform a nation, enough to attract the hunger of powers that had never truly left Africa, enough to test whether sovereignty was a dream or a destiny. But could a small Sahelian nation truly guard 60 billion against the appetites of the world? The discovery of $60 billion in gold did not remain a local story for long. Within hours, headlines blazed across global networks. The Financial Times described Burkina Faso as the new gold frontier of Africa. Reuters reported that international mining firms were already lining up, filing urgent requests for exploration licenses. Bloomberg went further, predicting that the nation's gross domestic product could surge tenfold if the reserves were managed properly. Flights soon landed in Ouagadougou, carrying men in tailored suits and polished shoes. Representatives from Canada, the United Arab Emirates, and Australia. In the lobbies of luxury hotels, whispers turned into strategy. 60 billion in the ground, one consultant murmured. Who will be first? Behind the polite smiles of diplomats and corporate envoys lay the same machinery that had long operated in Africa. Extract first, apologize later. Inside the presidential palace, Captain Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation with a steady voice. The cameras framed him against the flag, his words measured yet fierce. This treasure is not a prize for foreign corporations. It is the inheritance of every Burkinabe child, every farmer, every mother. Not a single kilogram will leave this land without bringing value back to our people. The statement rippled across the country. In the markets of Ouagadougou, vendors paused to listen, their radios crackling. In classrooms, teachers replayed his words to wide-eyed students. For many, it was a declaration that resonated with the spirit of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader who once warned, "He who feeds you controls you. He who minds you owns you." Traoré's defiance felt like an echo of that unfinished dream. And yet, hope carried a shadow of doubt. In Kaya, a group of young men debated in a cafe. "He speaks with fire," one said, "but can one man resist Paris, Beijing, Toronto?" Another leaned forward, conviction in his eyes. "If he cannot, who else will?" Their conversation mirrored a nation's heartbeat. Faith in leadership mingled with the memory of betrayals. Across the Sahel, elders gathered under neem trees, recalling the past. In Niger, they promised electricity, one said softly. Instead, Paris lit the Eiffel Tower while Niamey lived in darkness. Another added, in Angola, oil built glass towers, but 40% of the people still lacked clean water. The lesson was etched deep. Abundance could be dressed as prosperity, yet leave hunger untouched. The tension rose as reports surfaced of foreign lobbying. Canadian firms invoked old contracts demanding access. A leaked memorandum revealed that under the previous regime, one company had secured rights to recoup every dollar of its investment before sharing profits. For villagers in Gawa, that meant gold could leave their soil for years, while not a single franc returned to build a school or a well. Is this business, one elder asked bitterly, or theft dressed in a contract? Traoré's government acted quickly. Licenses were frozen, questionable agreements suspended. At a cabinet meeting, his words struck like iron. Better to buy our dignity than to sell our souls cheaply. His ministers nodded, though the weight of his stance was clear. Such defiance invited both admiration and enemies. The international press swirled with debate. Western analysts dismissed him as too radical, warning that investors would flee. Chinese state media spoke cautiously, branding Burkina Faso a challenging partner. Across African diaspora forums, arguments raged. Was this the birth of sovereignty or the path to isolation? Meanwhile, inside Burkina Faso, the atmosphere was electric. University halls buzzed with debates. Some students feared that rejecting investors would cut off vital funds. Others countered fiercely. And what did investors give Niger? Uranium for Paris, darkness for Niamey. Do you want the same fate? The rooms erupted in heated applause, the air thick with urgency. On the streets of Ouagadougou, murals began to appear, paintings of a clenched fist holding a golden nugget, with the words, "Not for their banks, for our children." Hope and skepticism mingled, graffiti becoming both protest and prayer. As dusk fell over the capital, Traoré's face returned to television screens. His voice rose above the noise of foreign envoys and domestic doubts. If we allow others to value our gold, we will buy back poverty with our own sweat. If we allow them to write our contracts, our children will inherit poisoned rivers and exhausted soil. I swear to you, not 1 ounce of gold will leave this land without dignity returning to our people. The crowd in Kaya roared, fists lifted into the Sahel sky. For that moment, a nation believed. Yet in quiet corners, questions persisted like whispers in the wind. Could a declaration of sovereignty stand firm against the avalanche of global ambition? Could one leader's resolve rewrite the fate that had crushed Congo, Niger, and Angola before them? Would the cheers of today still echo when the contracts of tomorrow are signed? The promise of gold quickly collided with the weight of reality. By mid-2025, Captain Ibrahim Traoré had taken a step few believed possible. He announced the nationalization of 5 major gold mines, placing them under Sopamib, the state-owned mining company. It was a decision that sent shockwaves through boardrooms from Toronto to Sydney. For many Burkinabe citizens, however, it was a moment of vindication. Miners in Bolsa raised their helmets high, chanting in celebration. For once, it seemed that the riches beneath the soil might truly belong to those who lived upon it. Yet sovereignty carried a price. The buyback of the Bangu mine, once controlled by a Canadian conglomerate, had cost $60 million plus $20 million in royalties. Critics argued the nation was bleeding scarce funds just to reclaim what had been stolen through contracts signed in silence. But Traoré was unmoved. Better to buy our dignity than to sell our souls cheaply, he declared. For him, this was not an expense. It was an investment in freedom. The glow of triumph was soon dimmed by tragedy. In April 2025, a tunnel collapsed in the Palmer region, trapping 17 artisanal miners underground. Fathers clawed at the earth with their bare hands. Mothers wailed into the dust, but no one emerged alive. The catastrophe was not merely a statistic. It was a wound carved into the nation's conscience. Standing before cameras the next day, Traoré's face was carved with grief. "No ounce of gold is worth 17 lives," he said. "From this day, unregulated pits will be shut down, and the state will take control." His words were resolute, but in villages across Kaya, people whispered, could a decree truly stop desperation when hunger itself drove men underground? The environmental cost mounted. In Gawa, wells once clear as glass turned reddish, carrying the acrid scent of chemicals. Women lifted buckets and asked bitterly, if water itself becomes poison, how do we feed our children? Tests ordered by the Ministry of Environment confirmed cyanide contamination. In response, the government banned cyanide-based processing near rivers and commissioned a state-funded purification plant. Still, scars on the land deepened faster than laws could heal. The human cost was heavier still. Reports from the World Health Organization revealed a 31% rise in respiratory illnesses among children living near mines. Hospitals overflowed with coughing patients. Doctors helpless without proper machines. "The dust is stronger than our medicine," one physician admitted. When this report reached the palace, Traoré summoned his health minister with urgency. "Then we will bring medicine stronger than the dust. Allocate funds now, even if we must cut our own salaries." His words became policy. Emergency budgets were redirected to strengthen rural clinics. Perhaps the most harrowing revelation was the exploitation of children. Inspectors uncovered girls as young as 12 carrying sacks heavier than their bodies, earning no more than $2 or $3 a day. Outrage spread quickly. At a press briefing, Traoré thundered, "A child belongs in a classroom, not a tunnel. From this year, any company found employing children will lose its license, not suspended, revoked." To support families who relied on child labor out of necessity, the Ministry of Education created a scholarship program, offering free schooling to 5,000 children from mining communities. Parents wept as names were announced, torn between pride and the pang of hunger. Could promises of tomorrow compete with the emptiness of today's bowls? Even culture was not spared. Sacred Mossi sites, places where ancestors had been honored for centuries, were bulldozed to make way for industrial tailings. Elders cried as drumhouses collapsed into rubble. In response, Traoré declared those zones protected heritage reserves. "Our ancestors are not collateral damage," he proclaimed at a rally in Ouagadougou. "Gold may glitter, but identity is priceless." His words stirred the crowd, but some asked whether fences and decrees could truly defend memory when bulldozers waited at the border. The government launched new measures: an environmental police force to raid illegal pits, strict regulations requiring mining firms to fund health clinics and clean water systems, and a bold demand for contract transparency. "We fight shadows with light," Traoré said. "Every shipment must be tracked, every agreement published. Let the people see who profits and who pays." For ordinary Burkinabe, the changes were felt in fragments. Some villages saw new wells drilled with mining funds. Others saw clinics rise where there had once been none. But elsewhere, rivers remained poisoned, and children still labored with bare hands. Graffiti, scrawled across walls in Ouagadougou, summed up the contradiction. "This gold belongs to us, or to no one." Across the nation, one question refused to fade. Was this the seed of sovereignty finally taking root? Or was it simply another chapter of sacrifice where the people bore the cost while promises shimmered in speeches? To many, the test of this struggle would define the Ibrahim Traoré legacy itself. Would history remember him as the captain who broke the curse, or as another leader trapped by it? Was this the seed of a new legacy, or another illusion dressed as reform. The world was watching, from Paris to Ottawa, from Dubai to Beijing. The announcement of Burkina Faso's golden reserves stirred boardrooms and ministries alike. Foreign embassies in Ouagadougou became busier than ever, their corridors buzzing with consultants, lobbyists, and lawyers. Briefcases arrived heavy with contracts, promises of billions in development packages, and quiet reminders of consequences should the government resist. Western analysts filled television screens with skepticism. On networks in London and Washington, commentators dismissed Captain Traoré as reckless, warning that he would isolate Burkina Faso from vital global partnerships. Financial journals speculated about lawsuits from multinational mining corporations. Radical nationalism does not build economies, one analyst declared. It destroys them. Yet, in the streets of Ouagadougou, that same statement was scrawled on a wall in defiance. Better radical than robbed. In Beijing, the language was more cautious. Chinese state media described Burkina Faso as a challenging partner, a phrase heavy with both warning and respect. For years, China had presented itself as a different kind of partner in Africa, builder of roads, bridges, and stadiums. But even Beijing understood that Traoré's insistence on refining gold domestically and publishing every clause of every contract was a direct challenge to the old rules of extraction. From Brussels, murmurs of sanctions drifted into diplomatic channels. The European Union, concerned with stability in the Sahel, hinted that radical reforms might undermine international investment. In the United Nations, reports warned of unregulated mining fueling conflict across the Sahel, though critics noted that these warnings often came only after profits had already been extracted. And then there was Washington. American officials framed their statements in the language of partnership and development, but their tone carried undertones of unease. Could one of the world's poorest nations truly dictate terms to giants? Was this the beginning of a precedent that might inspire others across Africa? Some commentators compared Traoré's stance to Thomas Sankora's vision in the 1980s, an unfinished revolution that had once unsettled the West. Amid this swirl of pressure, Traoré held firm. "We cannot beg for respect while signing contracts in the shadows," he declared. Every mining contract was now required to be published in newspapers and online, written in plain French and Mouret. Foreign investors balked. Some threatened to withdraw. Traoré's reply was sharp. Then let them walk. Better an empty treasury than a stolen one. For his supporters, this resolve was not simply about gold. It was about reclaiming the power to define the nation's future. They began to speak of his stance not as a short-term gamble, but as a vision for decades to come. A path toward economic independence, environmental protection, and dignity. In debates across universities, the phrase Ibrahim Traoré Vision 2050 began circulating, evoking an image of a Burkina Faso that would no longer be a mine for others, but a model for itself and for Africa. The question remained, however, could one small landlocked nation truly withstand the storm of lawsuits, the pressure of sanctions, and the calculations of powers far larger than itself? Could one small nation truly dictate terms to giants? Or would the giants rewrite the script? In the months that followed, a blueprint for the future began to take shape. Burkina Faso was no longer content with simply digging gold out of the ground. From now on, Traoré decreed, no license would be granted unless a refinery was built within the country. If you cannot refine here, then you will not mine here, he told a gathering in Ouagadougou, pointing to an empty plot of land where the first national smelter was planned. The crowd erupted, their cheers mingling with the dust of the Sahel. For once, people believed that value might stay where it was born. Another measure struck at the heart of local empowerment. 20% of all gold profits, Traore announced, would flow into a community development fund, managed not by distant ministries, but by elected village councils. In Banfora, elders debated whether to build wells or a clinic first. In Kaya, women demanded that funds be channeled into clean energy for their homes. For the first time, many said decisions felt like theirs. At the same time, an environmental protection unit was deployed to raid illegal mines and prosecute smugglers. Within weeks, trucks loaded with stolen ore were intercepted en route to Mali and Togo. If the world calls us poor, Traore declared, standing beside the unit, let them see how rich we are in law. The statement carried a symbolic weight. It was not only about resources, but about dignity. Education, too, was pulled into the future. Scholarships were granted to engineering students to study metallurgy and geology. We will train a generation of Burkinabe experts, Traore announced at the University of Ouagadougou. The age of foreign engineers exploiting our ignorance ends here. The hall erupted with applause, students chanting his name. Some whispered that if this succeeded, Burkina Faso could lead not only in mining, but in knowledge. Still, beneath the optimism, doubts persisted. Would village councils resist corruption any better than central ministries? Could new laws hold when gold itself tempted even those sworn to enforce them? Would the promise of local refineries stand against the economic firepower of corporations used to shaping Africa's fate? The path ahead was uncharted. To supporters, it looked like the dawn of sovereignty. To critics, it looked like the brink of isolation. But for the people of Burkina Faso, it was something more intimate, a chance to finally write their own story. In marketplaces, a new phrase began to appear on walls and placards. If gold is to curse us, let it stay buried. If it is to bless us, let it feed our children. The road stretched ahead, uncertain yet luminous, like a torch flickering in the Sahel night. Could this road lead to sovereignty or back to the shadows of dependency? $60 billion beneath the soil. For some, it is the promise of prosperity. For others, it is the shadow of a curse Africa has known too well. Burkina Faso now stands at the fault line of history, where wealth can either nourish or destroy, where contracts can either liberate or chain. Captain Ibrahim Traoré has spoken with a defiance rare in modern times. No secret clauses, no foreign refineries, no exploitation hidden in fine print. His voice has carried across villages and boardrooms alike, insisting that dignity cannot be sold, not even for gold, but promises are not yet victories. The world's appetite remains insatiable, and history whispers warnings. In Congo, mountains of riches bought nothing but scars. In Niger, uranium lit Paris, while Niamey fell into darkness. In Angola, oil built towers, while children drank poisoned water. The question now is whether Burkina Faso can break this cycle, or whether it will become another chapter in Africa's long ledger of plunder. Supporters believe this struggle may one day be remembered as the true Ibrahim Traoré legacy, a leader who refused to bow, who turned resource wealth into schools, wells, and dignity. Critics fear the opposite, that lawsuits, sanctions, and global isolation may erode even the strongest will. Yet in the debates, one vision keeps resurfacing: the possibility of an Ibrahim Traoré Vision 2050, a future where gold is not exported raw, but refined at home, where profits build not only cities, but also villages, where sovereignty is more than a slogan. It is a lived reality. What lies ahead is uncertain, but one truth remains clear. The choice between curse and blessing is not written in stone. It is written in courage, and courage, once awakened, can be stronger than gold. If you believe this story must be told, share it, comment below, and subscribe, because Africa's future will not be decided in foreign offices. It will be forged in the hearts of its own people.